Hello, good afternoon. This video will be tailored to fair value gaps and how they work, kind of. I had a comment actually in my basics video about what I've learned, asking for the fair value gaps, what is the smallest candle that would still be big enough to be called a fair value gap? Now, for me to answer that question, you have to understand what a fair value gap is. A fair value gap is essentially an imbalance of price. So if you look at a scale, there's going to be a buy side and there's going to be a sell side. Whichever way it tips is going to be an imbalance, right? So that's how I want you to kind of think about it. If there's an imbalance towards sell side liquidity, that means that price action is just going to move down like this. Or if there's an imbalance in buy side liquidity, price action is going to move up like this. And these are what fair value gaps are. There are higher time frame fair value gaps and there are lower time frame fair value gaps. For example, you won't see all of this, like these little candles of a bullish fair value gap, or like all of these little parts of a bearish fair value gap. If you go to a higher time frame and you look at the same chart, I didn't mean to draw that. If you look at the same chart, there's going to be a lot less candles. That's because they're just like more conjoined together. And they'd just be like one big bullish fair value gap or a couple big bullish fair value gaps, or like one big bearish fair value gap. And that's, I don't know, that's what you would call a fair value gap. It's just an imbalance of price. So if we go back to the chart, to answer your question, what is the smallest candle that can still be considered a fair value gap? I would tell you, it depends on what time frame you're looking at, but any candle that is in a movement towards an imbalance. So these little candles right here, like these two right here, these would still be considered fair value gaps. Or maybe just these two right here, these would still be considered fair value gaps. Why? Because they're part of a bigger, higher time frame fair value gap candle. So, on the 1 minute time frame, when you're kind of sniping for an entry on a trade, again, I talked about this in my last video. I only really use higher time frames to kind of for confirmation on where the move is going. So if all of this right here is a higher time frame fair value gap, I would wait until the inverse for the inverse fair value gap to hit maybe around here for an entry. And that retest is right there too, so okay, this is a pretty good entry. Why? Because you have a lot of confluences already. You have a break of structure, you have a liquidity grab, you have inverse fair value gaps right here, confirmation on the inverse by it invalidating this whole entire bullish fair value gap candle right here, and you have a retest and fail. So that's I guess you can also use order blocks here. Here's an order block up here. If it goes past it, you can enter off that too, and you have a better entry. But just if you want to play a little safer, you can wait till this is get inversed, and yeah. So any little candles that are a part of a bigger, higher time frame fair value gap movement or an inverse fair value gap movement, I would consider still a fair value gap. I wouldn't consider, however, these little candles, or I wouldn't really call them a fair value gap, especially if you're sniping for an entry on a lower time frame like the 1 minute. They're not they're just not big enough for confirmation. That doesn't really show a true move, because what could happen if you try to enter off of these like little candles right here? There could just be like pure consolidation. There could really just be like a lot of consolidation, and there's no real big movement towards the upside, or it would take super long, and I don't know if you're comfortable in holding out for that long, but there's just like less volatility, and volatility is the reason why people trade on certain sessions like New York AM, so they know where the movement is primarily going, and they can get their money faster. They can hit their TP faster. It's just more of a reliable trade, I guess. I don't know if you would ever want to enter off something like this, because this could be like a good sign for consolidation. What is consolidation? It's just when price just moves up and down and up and down, up and down, kind of like this. It's just there's no clear direction on where it's going. But yeah, I just wouldn't call these fair value gap candles on a lower time frame, but obviously these do form higher time frame fair value gap candles. So if you want to use them on a higher time frame for confirmation on an entry, or yeah, you can. Maybe I would enter. Actually, I don't know. I wouldn't really snipe an entry on a higher time frame, but yeah. So the smallest candle that you can consider a fair value gap would just be a candle that is a part of a higher time frame fair value gap. So something like this. I would consider this like these candles right here, the smallest candles that could be considered a fair value gap for an entry. If you're looking for confirmation on a higher time frame, you can still call these, like after it forms after a while, you can call these candles, even though they're not as big, or what, they're actually pretty much the same size, except for maybe this one. I wouldn't use this candle as an entry. Actually, well, you can be considered a retest an entry, but I wouldn't consider just any small candles a fair value gap candle. So something like, I know a lot of people use higher time frames for their entry and confirmation, but me personally, I don't. So if you're using the 1 minute, something like this would be like the smallest fair value gap candle that you can consider being a fair value gap. So yeah, I hope that answered the question, and if anyone else is watching this video, I hope I explained fair value gaps a lot better. It's essentially just an imbalance of price. So if there's an imbalance in price towards sell, it's always going to move down. Or if there's an imbalance of price towards a buy, it's going to move up, like this right here, or like this right here. That's essentially all a fair value gap is. So yeah, that I wouldn't use fair value gaps alone to entry on anything. You need to have other confluences like liquidity sweeps, break of structure. You can use order blocks if you want. If it respects it or becomes a breaker block. I don't know. Change of character. What else is there? Retest and confirmation. I don't know if other people call it that, but that's what I call it. Where just there's a candle that tries to retest the move, but it fails. So that's how you know that the move is going to continue going down. And I would still call these fair value gaps. So yeah, that is what a fair value gap is, and the smallest fair value gap that you can really use as like a confluence on your entry, or you can consider a fair value gap candle. Alright, that is all for today, and I'll make an update on today's day later tonight. It's the day after Black Friday, so I'm still waiting for all the analytics and results and data to run through to make a video on it. So yeah, I'll keep you guys updated. I hope I answered that question correctly.